Dipti is here, though. I know where you are now. Dipti, you're going to look through the papers. You're starting with the Philippines, aren't you? Rodrigo Duterte has appointed a rival to head the task force overseeing the war on drugs.
That's right. It's quite a surprising decision from Duterte. A 58-year-old former human rights lawyer and Vice President Leni Robredo recently slammed Duterte's brutal war on drugs. She said that his approach to drugs has boosted his tough image but done little to curb addiction or trafficking. Well, on Wednesday, she was offered and accepted the post of co-chair of the drug war task force. She says her objective now is to, quote, stop the killings of innocent people and hold those responsible accountable.
Now, the appointment might be a pretty shrewd political move on the part of Duterte.
Well, perhaps Duterte was sensing a looming political rival in Rodrigo. She's a political newcomer, and maybe he thought by handing the reins to her to tackle the war on drugs, arguably the most pressing issue in the country, he could be setting her up to fail. The papers note that some advisors even told Robredo to refuse the post, seeing it as a poison chalice, or here, as you might see, a venomous snake. For the editors of the Philippine Star, Robredo's main issue with the war on drugs was Duterte's brutal methods. Well, now as chair, she has a chance to stop the violence. Her success will inevitably mean the success of the country.
To the US for this next story we mentioned in the news, in fact. A cyclist who was fired for sticking up her finger at Donald Trump's motorcade has actually won political office now.
That's right. Julie Briskman, she famously or infamously flipped the bird at Donald Trump's motorcade in 2017. Her employee, a government contractor at the time, then fired her over the photo. Briskman won her race on Tuesday night for a seat on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors in Virginia. Now, what's interesting is that she joins a host of female candidates who've helped to flip, pardon the pun, the Virginia legislature. It's a really interesting article from Vox that says that, the Virginia legislature turned Democratic for the first time in 20 years. 2 years ago, Danica Rome, the state's first openly transgender lawmaker, won office, as well as a host of Latina candidates and the first Asian American female delegate. A record 28 women were nominated to the legislative chamber back then, and all but one of them were Democrats. On Tuesday, most of them held onto their seats. There were even some newcomers like Ghazala Hashmi, the first Muslim woman elected. Their record elections send a message to Democrats in 2020, Vox says, that despite concerns about the electability of women, women can and do win.
And that message perhaps also sending a message to Democrats about actually where to focus their attention when that election comes around.
Well, that's right. The New York Times looks at that today. Tuesday's election was one of the most consequential for the Democrats in decades. They now have majorities in both chambers of the General Assembly. And in this article, Tram Nguyen writes that part of the failure of the Democratic Party in the past is a belief that these communities aren't worth investing in because they were staunchly Republican. Well, the lesson here is that Democrats must not write off entire communities or geographies. It's a work of minutiae. You have to start right now. You have to start on the ground, canvassing people door to door.
Now then, let's move to a different controversy now. This is involving Nigeria's submission to the Best Foreign Picture Awards at the Oscars.
Well, earlier this week, Nigeria submitted Genevieve Naji's film Lionheart for the Oscar category of foreign language film, which is actually changed to international feature film. Naji is one of Africa's most recognized screen stars. This was Nigeria's first ever submission to the Oscars, except that the Oscars committee disqualified the film because it was filmed in Nigerian English and not a non-English dialect, as per the rules. However, the issue is that Nigeria's lingua franca is English, with Naji pointing out that, we did not choose who colonized us. But it does raise interesting points. Why is Nigerian English not considered a foreign language in much the same way American English or Australian English might be considered foreign to Nigerians? Ultimately, there's an article from this website called African Arguments that says it's tied to these purist attitudes upheld by predominantly white Western countries. So in a way, it's another case of the Oscars being culturally blind.
Yeah, where do you draw the line, I suppose? Now, finally from Dipti, this is an article from Country Life. It's a lifestyle magazine, of course. It's raised quite a lot of discussion, this, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Well, it certainly affects you, Stuart, as a gentleman or a man in 2019.
Are you calling me a gentleman?
Well, this is the question. Are you a gentleman in 2019? So this magazine, Country Life, put together a list of 39 things that make you a gentleman, from the pretentious things like having a child or dog named after you, owning a library that requires a ladder, and unnecessarily knowing how to open an expensive bottle of champagne with a sword. I'm not sure if you can do that.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah.
Other things that make you a gentleman, knowing how to foxtrot, cook a meal entirely from produce that you caught, killed, or grew, breaking up a fight using your wit, and buying a one-way ticket somewhere exotic. Some of them are also eyebrow-raising. I know this is not a word. Eyebrow-raisingly dubious in this post-Me Too movement, including rescuing someone like a fair maiden. That's the actual word they use. Being married at least once, and plowing a field with your own tractor. Why on earth would you need to do that?
I've been looking
Unless
down
you're a farmer.
I know, it's very bizarre. I've been looking down the list, which is why I took my glasses off in the first place. The only one I think I've managed to do is get married at least once. I mean, I've only done it once, but at least I did one of them.
At least you did that well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm off to
Have
learn
you
how-
not bought an entire barrel of Burgundy?
No, but I'm going to go off and learn how to foxtrot immediately. Thanks, Dipti. Did you the papers on France 24?